Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's program, we have some bombshell reports from Texans insiders revolving around the CJ Gardner-Johnson exit from the Houston Texans. That surprising, shocking release yesterday. There's more details about what led up to that release. Also, the Texans are getting more defensive back reinforcements, not only with guys getting healthier on the roster, but they made a signing today from the Dallas Cowboys, and our Cowboys insider breaks down what the Texans should expect from their new defensive back. Before we get going, though, this is a place for all Texans fans, and I know it's been a rough start to this season, guys. 0-3, not what any of us had in the cards, but hey, we're here. We're fans through thick and thin. And if you agree with that, if you're here still rocking with me, go ahead and hit that thumbs up icon. I appreciate all of y'all still watching the videos, still being engaged, because I know it's tough. It's easy to kind of just say, hey, season's done with, I'm over with. But I appreciate each and every single one of y'all who's clicked into today's video. So let's get started breaking down this CJ Gardner-Johnson news. Let's get started on today's show with more information regarding the CJ Gardner-Johnson release. It was shocking. Everybody around the NFL world did not see this one coming, but there was more into it than what we first expected. With multiple insiders reporting, there was some friction, some problems behind the scenes. I have two insiders that we're going to break down today. First up, DJ Bien-Aime, the ESPN reporter for the Houston Texans, had this to say. Gardner-Johnson has struggled to pick up Coach DeMeco Ryans' defensive scheme this season, which has contributed to several big plays against the secondary through the first 3 weeks for the Texans, who are 0-3 to start the season. On Monday, Ryans was asked about the communication between his secondary players, admitting it hasn't been great. Each of the Texans' 3 losses has been 7 points or less. At minimum, according to team sources, Gardner-Johnson has allowed 3 big plays in those games that have contributed to the opposing offense scoring touchdowns, adding that Gardner-Johnson has struggled to consistently guard the correct opposing player when required to match coverage based on the Texans' defensive call. Now, we had seen, some stuff in the secondary with this Texans team throughout the first 3 games. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to, have an eye in the sky to realize, the Texans secondary hasn't been playing up to snuff this year, even though they really haven't allowed a ton on this Texans defense. They haven't let more than 21 points up in a single game this year. There was a couple touchdowns where you're like, that doesn't seem right. It looks like the communication wasn't there on the back end. And according to reports, it seems like a lot of that attribution has to do with CJ Gardner-Johnson. DJ Bien-Aime, he also continued with this. During Houston's Week 1 matchup against the Los Angeles Rams, quarterback Matthew Stafford threw a 13-yard touchdown to tight end Davis Allen, who ran a corner route into the end zone, which Gardner-Johnson was responsible for. Texans cornerback Kamari Lassiter tried to clean up coverage bust, but wasn't able to run down Allen. Houston lost that game 14-9. In Week 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Baker Mayfield threw an over route to wideout Ryan Miller for a 20-yard touchdown on the game's opening drive. The Texans were in cover 2, which required Gardner-Johnson to cover the deep right half of the field. He instead jumped a 10-yard in-breaking route from Buccaneers wide receiver Sterling Shepard, exposing the deep half for the Miller scoring reception. The Texans lost that game 20-19. So, as you see, a reoccurring theme of some problems on the back end with CJ Gardner-Johnson. And at this point, you're like, okay, so you're saying the Texans released him because he wasn't playing up to snuff? That's not the case. Looks like they tried to fix it, but that didn't go too well. DJ Bien-Aime had this to say. Compounding the coverage bust, Gardner-Johnson has refused to take responsibility for his mistakes, rubbing his teammates the wrong way, sources added, with one member of the team saying Gardner-Johnson finger-pointed instead of owning up to the mistakes, which obviously, with a guy of his caliber, somebody who's been in the league long enough as he has, a veteran, you should be able to take criticism on, days where you go in, watch the video from the prior game and say, hey, look, you didn't do this or this correctly. You should be able to internalize that, get better, and play better as a veteran in this league. I find it hard-pressing to believe that CJ Gardner-Johnson hasn't had this situation happen before where coaches in the meeting room, maybe the head coach, maybe the defensive coordinator, maybe his position coach called him out on something. And maybe that's why he hasn't been able to stay at places longer than 2 or 3 seasons over the past couple of years, because that kind of compounding friction between him, coaches, other players, has built up to where he kind of outwore his welcome. And it looks like the Texans, DeMeco Ryans wasn't playing with that. This coming in from Aaron Wilson as well. Among the issues that arose with Gardner-Johnson, per sources, criticism of the teammates in the secondary, including the size of one of the other players' contracts, complaints about his role, including a desire to blitz more frequently, and a trade request. It was simply too much for the Texans to tolerate. All right, there's an unspoken rule. You don't talk about another man's money. If this is true, if this is the case, if this report by Aaron Wilson is factual, that he was calling out other players and talking about other players' salaries, I could see how this Texans front office, this Texans team said, hey, that's enough. We're done with you, CJ Gardner-Johnson. You're not worth the headache of what you're doing behind the scenes with how you're playing on the field on Sundays. And I might be reading between the lines here, but the only player in the secondary that I think he could even possibly be talking about when it comes to player contracts is Derek Stingley, who is the highest paid corner in the NFL. He's the only one who got big money. Maybe him, maybe Jalen Petrie. Those are the only two that I'm thinking that he could be talking about when talking about other players' contracts. Either way, you don't do that. In the NFL, there is that unwritten rule. You don't talk about another man's money. I would never say, oh, you deserve this amount, you deserve this amount, you're not making enough, or you're making way too much. That's not your place. You're a player. You have nothing to do with the behind the scenes. You have nothing to do with how NFL GMs, how the GM of the Texans manages the contracts. You need to worry about your money, and you already got it. The Texans already restructured CJ Gardner-Johnson's contract to where he got his money up front this season. So there is no room for him to be talking about other players' contracts, especially with all that breakdown of the missed assignments that he had during the first 3 weeks of this Texans season. Now, I'm going to turn it over to you. After hearing all the reports, did the Texans make the right move in releasing CJ Gardner-Johnson? Give me a yes, give me a no down in the comments section. And while you're down there, why don't you check out the sponsor of today's program, our friends over at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every single day. But on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. PrizePicks is available in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. I love PrizePicks. And hey, this weekend, I think I got a killer lineup for you with an amazing deal. Jalen Hurts, 0.5 passing yards. I know Chris Jones, the Chiefs D-end, he was making fun of Jalen Hurts for not being able to pass the ball. I think he'll be able to get 1 yard. Right? He'll be able to get 1 yard. They're giving you that one, guys. Then I paired it with this lineup. C.J. Stroud, 16.5 rush yards. Give me the more on that. He's been using his feet a lot more this season. Tony Pollard, the Texans' defense was very stout last week. Less on 64.5 rush yards. You can use this lineup or go make your own with our friends over at PrizePicks. And the best part about that lineup, PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So go download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, let's talk about the Texans reinforcements that are coming in the DB room. First up, Texans rookie Jalen Reed has made a sound recovery from a sprained knee, eligible and regarded as likely to be designated for return from injured reserve in the next few weeks. Eligible to be activated after the fourth game is Jalen Reed. So that's one part of the puzzle of how the Texans are going to move past the release of CJ Gardner-Johnson. Looking at sixth-round rookie Jalen Reed, he looked really good in training camp and rookie minicamp. He was impressing a lot of the Texans coaching staff. So maybe that's part of the reason why they were like, you know what? We have a rookie that we really like. We'd rather just take our chances with him than CJ Gardner-Johnson at this point. They also went ahead and made another move today. They signed Zion Childress from the Cowboys practice squad. And this was a little bit of a surprising move because if you sign another player from another team's practice squad, that means you have to have them on your active roster for the next 3 games. So Zion Childress will be a part of the Texans 53-man roster for the next 3 game days at least. I was like, who the hell is Zion Childress? Lucky for us, we have a Cowboys insider here at Chat Sports, Tom Downey. This is what he told me about Zion Childress. Strong training camp plus preseason got him onto the active roster before waiver claims. Called up the last 2 weeks from the practice squad, but only did special team stuff. Played safety and nickel at the University of Kentucky, and the Cowboys had him at nickel. More of a physical player than an elite coverage guy. Thank you, Tom Downey. That cheese and face there from the Cowboys report. If you have any Cowboys friends, send them over to that channel. He does a great job. My overall take about this, though, is okay. It's an okay signing. A lot of people are saying the Cowboys really like this guy. Obviously, had him on the practice squad. They kept him on the 53-man so he didn't get stolen by other teams, but didn't love him enough to keep him on that active roster, allowing the Texans to take him away. The only problem is, the biggest problem with CJ Gardner-Johnson was his coverage ability. Biggest problem with Zion Childress is his coverage ability. So you're kind of swapping out a guy who's not good in coverage for somebody who you had coverage concerns about. So is it an okay signing? Yeah, he's cheap. He was a practice squad player. He was an undrafted free agent this year from the University of Kentucky. His athletic ability is, here and there, but he is a physical guy. DeMeco Ryans in this defensive scheme, they love physical corners, and that's exactly what Zion Childress is. Really plays in the slot for most of his snaps, can also play some free safety for you. So another piece of the puzzle, another addition to probably the special teams unit as well for special teams coach Frank Ross. An okay signing, but I expect the Texans to either, heavily use rookie Jalen Reed or potentially look to add another defensive back later on down the road. That's all I got for you in today's show, folks. If you made it to the end of today's video and you're subscribed, you're an absolute real one. Spam those H's down below so I know you made it to the end of today's video. And if you're watching this on Wednesday, we're about to go live, so make sure you tap in 3:30 Central Time for our Texans Today live show. Every Wednesday we'll be going live, so don't miss out. Make sure you tap in. Make sure to spam those H's down below.